Hey guys, so I've increased my font size since the last video and I've changed the theme color to white to make it a bit easier to see. So now we can begin working with our JavaScript file. So in the last video I showed you how to right click here and inspect, but on some browsers you can also do this by hitting F12 on the keyboard. And now we're in the console here. You might be in the elements page when you start, so just click on console here, and this is where our output will show for now. So for right now we're not going to output anything into the actual page, we're just going to be using the console to view outputs. So in this video I'm just going to show you two things. One is how to print something out, and the other is how do we store information. So to print something out, we want to use the word console, and console is referring to this console here, so the place where we view the code. And we want to do console dot. So before I continue, how this is actually working is, in programming languages there's something called a class, and a class is a model of something. So in this case, the word console here is a class that is a model of this console here. And now we want to access a function within this console. So we want to access the log function, which is how we log something out to this console. And to call a function, we need to use brackets like this. So open and close brackets. And inside of this we want to just put whatever we want it to print out. But unlike in HTML, here when we're just working with text, we need it to be within quotes. So we can't just have raw text around, we need the text to be surrounded by quotes. And I'm just going to type Theo here just to see what it does. And as you can see here, it just prints out Theo. But let's get back to this and talk about how this works. So in programming languages, we have something called classes, which is basically a model that's trying to show something in code. It's trying to model something in code. So for example, imagine if a human was modeled in code. Then you would have a class for hand, a class for leg, a class for head, and so on. And each of those classes would have functions. So for example, in the hand you could have a function called close, so that's where you'd close your hand, or open, where you'd open your hand. Or for the head you could have a function like blink, and that's basically how this works. So usually the first word you type here is a class. In this case it's console, that's what we're going to be accessing, and then the name of a function, and we use a dot here because the function belongs to this class. Now not all functions belong to classes. You can just have a function on its own, we'll get to that later, but for right now that's how classes and functions work. So now that we know how to print something out, we can change the text here to anything, by the way, and if we save it we'll print that out. Let's look at how we can save information. So to do this, we're going to use something called a variable. So to create a variable, we use the keyword let. And you can see here that some suggestions pop up. It's just this first let. You don't have to click on anything here. You can just type the word let and put a space here. And then we give our variable a name. So I'm just going to call this container, and there's a reason why I'm calling it that, but you can name this anything you want. And then we use the equals to sign, and we can put any value here. So I'm just going to put my name again. And remember, since we're working with text here, it has to be surrounded by quotes. And at the end of this line, it's good practice to use this semicolon thing here. You don't need to use it. It's a bit outdated now. JavaScript no longer requires you to put this at the end of each line, but it's good practice to put it there. And if I save this now, so what this container is it's a variable, and a variable is something that you can store code inside of. Not code, you can store values inside of it, sorry. So when we store values inside of this, we're either doing it so that we can access that value later, or we're doing it so we can track changes to that value throughout the page. Now, obviously, this is a bit complicated right now. I just want you to understand what a variable is. It's just a container that a value can be stored inside of. And you can also replace what's inside of it later on. So for example, I can say container is now equal to something else. So now we've replaced what's inside of container. And the reason why I use the name container is so that it makes more sense. You can understand that whatever we put on this side is just going inside of it. But yeah, to use the value inside of container, we can just simply console.log, and then we want to print out container here. We don't need to include the quotes or anything. We just type the name of the variable. And if we save this, it will print out what's inside of our variable here. By the way, there's many different types of values. So when we're working with text, we need to surround it in these quotes. But if you were to work with the number, for example, it's fine if we just type the number on its own, no quotes. And this is how we would work with numbers. You can also work with true and false here. So if I type the word true, it will print out true. This is not actually text though. True is a value. So if you type something else, like something random, that wouldn't work. That will give you an error. So true and false are actual values. And yeah, there's a few other values that we could look at, but I think you get the idea now. It's just a container that we store something inside of. As for the let keyword here, that's just a keyword we put in front when we're creating a variable. There's other versions of this as well. For example, var. This is kind of the same thing. And then we also have const. So const is a bit different. If we use the keyword const, we can't change what's inside of container later. So here, if I try and set container equal to something else, we're going to get an error here. Assignment to constant variable. So we aren't allowed to reassign the data inside a constant variable. So constant variables are used for holding information that will never change. And yeah. So in the next video, we'll look at some more functions and variable types. I think there's a few more variable types that I want to go over, like lists and arrays and stuff. So yeah, make sure you check out the next video. But for now, this is all. And if you have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments below.